Good afternoon, folks. I'm Keith Maready, a representative on your Master National Retriever Club board from Region 1. Currently this year, I serve as your MNRC president. I'm joined here this evening by Mr. Frank Barton. Frank serves on your board of directors. Frank is our annual event secretary. Also joined by Mr. Chuck Strange, representative on your board of directors. Chuck is representative from Region 3. Chuck also serves this year as our annual event chief marshal. Purpose of us being here this evening is to provide some clarity and some understanding on the recently distributed idea of a qualifier model going forward. The original one that was submitted a couple of weeks or so ago, we received a lot of feedback. We hear you, and we're trying to pay attention and listen to what you're saying. As a result of that, there was a committee assigned of board members to study the multitude of feedback that we got and to see what modifications were possible to be made that may make it a better model, more attractive to you folks. So with that in mind, we're also aware there are a couple of other models being talked about, one of which we're pretty sure is being developed currently. Another one being talked about, the one that we think is being developed currently is a model of a split version, two different nationals in two different areas of the country. The other one we're hearing is going back to the way we were several years ago, of needing to pass 5 out of 7 or 6 out of 8 weekend tests in order to qualify, get an invitation to the annual national event. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Frank Barton to go into some detailed clarity explanation of the tweaked version of what you've recently received.
Thank you, Keith. As Keith said, after the original plan was rolled out, we had quite a few comments from people in the retriever community all across the country. And so the committee that Keith referred to took all those comments that we've been hearing and made some suggestions for changes. And I'm going to talk about what the current version of those changes looks like. The first one is we're recommending that the passes required to be eligible for a qualifier be reduced from 6 to 5, and then you'll still have to have your Master Hunter title in addition to your 5 passes. What this is going to do is it will keep people from having to run an extra weekend test at than what they're currently doing. So 5 passes at the weekend level, and then you'll get to run the qualifier, which would be the equivalent of 6 tests that you're currently running now. The other suggestion that we've got is a big change, and that is any dog that has a pass at the Master National will be exempt from having to run the 5 weekend test, and they're eligible to run the qualifier. So what's that going to mean in practical terms? In practical terms is the 435 dogs last year at the Oregon event had 1 or 2 prior Master National passes. That'll mean that those 435 dogs would no longer have to run weekend tests to be eligible to run a qualifier. Their owners would save the time and save the money that they were spending. They would just have to run the qualifier. And also, those 435 dogs would not be running weekend tests, which will free up slots for other people to get entered into weekend tests. So we think this change will be well received and going forward. The next would be the MNH dogs, the Master National Hunter dogs, the Hall of Fame dogs. We talked to various owners of current MNH dogs and asked them, do we need to keep the exemption for them like it is now, or should those dogs still run a qualifier and then go to the national event? And without exception, they all said, keep the MNH exemption, let those dogs go to the national event, let them skip the qualifier. So the current plan has that in place. Next, and this was the one we spent the most time on, and that was, how many attempts at a qualifier will you get? The original proposal had one, and then people started suggesting, well, we need more than one. Dogs have a bad day, let us have at least two. We understand why it was suggested. And as we started working through the logistics of when and where these qualifiers were going to take place, we realized quickly that adding that second qualifier attempt was going to make the plan too difficult to manage effectively. We also heard from clubs that had said, we're going to host a qualifier, we're willing to do it, but we only want to host one. And we did not want those clubs to feel pressured of having to host multiple qualifiers. So that was reason one. Reason number two is this qualifier is an integral part of this new Master National model. And we realize dogs have a bad day. You can have a bad day in the first series at the Master National. You don't get a mulligan at the Master National. You're not going to get a mulligan at a qualifier. So our current plan is one qualifier attempt. The next was the time frame for dogs to be eligible to run a qualifier. We heard from a lot of the professional trainers that the time frame that we proposed at first was too long. It needed to be shortened up. And so they said, just go back to the same time frame that we got right now. So the current time frame that we got now is August 1 to July 31 to get your 5 passes. That is also the same time frame to get your qualifying pass. And we recognize the problem with that for a dog that gets that 5th pass late in June or in July, that they may not have the ability or the time to get entered into a qualifier. We're working on another model with a different set of time frames. So don't be surprised that when the final version of this qualifier plan comes out, that the time frame for eligibility will get changed. But we're going to do it in such a way that will give the best benefit to the most people. Next was, clubs said we have to be able to limit entries. We can't have unlimited entries. We don't have the grounds, we don't have the equipment, we don't have the manpower to handle that. We absolutely have to be able to limit entries. We understand, we looked at it, and we agreed that clubs need to have the ability of limiting entries that are going to be hosting this. So they will, they'll tell us we can host 1 flight, 2 flights, 3 flights of 100 dogs each. And they'll tell us that in their proposal. Now, when we do that, then that's also going to mean that the amateur set-aside provision for entries will be put in place. So amateurs will have an opportunity of entering before professionals. But we also recognize that we're going to have some more qualifiers than what we originally thought we were going to need. So we're going to take that into effect, and we'll have enough qualifiers to be able to handle everything. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the host club reimbursement. There was some confusion on the host club reimbursement about how host clubs were going to be reimbursed and how much they were going to be reimbursed. The board is still talking about this. The final plan on that has not been decided on yet, but the host club the Master National Board is absolutely adamant that host clubs that host a qualifier will be compensated appropriately for doing that. That means they're going to have all their expenses paid and they're going to get something on top of that. How much that's going to be is still being worked out, but the board is adamant that the host clubs will be adequately compensated, and they've already communicated that to the clubs that have indicated a desire to host a qualifier. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck, who's going to talk about what the qualifying event's going to look like and what the national event will look like.
All right. Thanks, Frank. Hi, folks. So the qualifier, like Frank touched on, I mean, there will be at least 2 qualifiers held in each region, one in the northern area and one down in the southern area. This is to minimize the travel and the cost to our handlers. With that said, there's nothing to prevent a handler from entering a qualifier in a different region should you choose. However, a dog's entry is going to be limited to 1 qualifier unless it's due to an illness, an injury, or a scratch as outlined in our premium. You know, we have the data that tells us how many dogs participate currently in the Master National by region, by state. By using this data, we know some regions will require more than just the 2 qualifiers, but this will allow us to plan accordingly since we know the numbers and we can ensure everybody gets a chance to enter a qualifier in your region. In regards to the numbers, for example, Region 1, the northern states had 23 dogs and the southern states had 105 dogs. Region 2, the north had 93 dogs, while the south had 281 dogs. In Region 3, the north had 91 dogs and the southern states had 191. In Region 4, we had 108 dogs in the northern states and 58 in the southern states. So by knowing the data, we can plan accordingly with the qualifiers to make sure we got adequate numbers set up in advance for everybody to participate. At the qualifier, as Frank mentioned, it is going to be a standalone event, but it is an integral part of the new Master National model, as you will need a pass at the qualifier to receive an invite to run the national event, unless you have an MNH title dog. Remember, dogs with the MNH title are exempt from the qualifier and will have an invite to the national event. At the qualifier event, you can expect the same elements as required by the AKC guidelines for a master test, and you'll earn 1 master pass and a ribbon for a qualifying score. As Frank touched on earlier with the host clubs, the Master National will select and approve the clubs to host the qualifier events. The Master National will also have board member or members on site at the event to help ensure consistency across the country. The Master National will also be responsible for selecting the judges for the qualifier events, just like we do currently for the annual event. We also plan on having judges brought in from other regions where the qualifier is being held. This will allow the judges to run local qualifier events and still judge other qualifier events. At the qualifier, the judges are expected to utilize good bird placement, terrain, natural conditions when designing their test so that a dog's ability can be evaluated beyond the minimum requirements and worthy of a national standard. Now for the national event, we'll continue to rotate the regions like we do currently and use the same time frame for the national event as we do currently for the annual event. This national event eliminates a lot of the complaints we heard last year around the split model not being a national event and everyone not being together at one time. From the qualifier and from the MNH titled dogs, we expect around 600 to 650 dogs at the national event. This number will allow the judges more time to evaluate the dog's performance above that of the minimum requirements and back to the top of the standard for a master hunter. With the expectation of 600 to 650 dogs, not only will allow more time for the judges to evaluate the dog's performance, but it will also open up more locations in each region that we are capable of hosting the national event, given the smaller number of dogs. In short, the national event would exceed the minimum requirements for a master test and get us back to a national standard. As a handler, you can expect more than 3 series, more blinds, more flyers, and the use of pheasants again at the national event. Dogs that obtain the qualifying score at the national event would receive credit for 1 master pass and continue to receive a qualifying ribbon and the Master National plate. Handlers participating in the Master Amateur will continue to receive credit for passes at the Master National event, and the Master National will continue to recognize passes for a dog at the Master Amateur. Keith, back to you.
All right, thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Frank. Folks, as I mentioned earlier, our purpose was to provide some clarity and understanding on this idea of a qualifier model going forward. Hope that the time has been beneficial. Reasoning behind doing any of this, spending our time trying to develop it, putting it out to you folks, is at our annual winter board meeting back in January. Mr. Russ Rivas, AKC field representative, most of you folks know of Russ. He presented to us at that meeting an extreme desire by AKC that we get our annual testing event back to a national level, testing the dogs at the highest maximum standard of the rules and regulations set out by AKC. He also acknowledged, as we all know, the hindrances that we face, not just number of dogs, but number of dogs causes a ripple effect into appropriate grounds, adequate grounds, timing. So the entire effort is put towards trying to get back to a national event that will test and produce the best of the best hunt test retrievers at that annual event. It's also our extreme desire. We're putting this out there in the format of an idea, if you will, to hear from you folks. We need to believe that the majority of folks would be satisfied with what gets put in place going forward in an effort to increase the quality of our event. With that said, if we looking forward to your feedback. We'll take any questions, and I would ask that you contact your regional representatives on the board. Our contact information, phone numbers, emails, it's all on the Master National website. You can find us right there. But let us hear from you. And again, we hope it's been a beneficial time for you. We appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing all of you late October, just a few months down the road here. And look forward to seeing you in Thomasville. Look forward to a good event. Good night, folks.